Hey everyone. So tonight I'm doing a coding challenge that was suggested to me by a software engineer that I had a phone call with earlier today. And he mentioned that a lot of React interviews, a really common coding challenge that comes up is to just build a simple counter app. So for example, you just have a number displayed on the screen and then a button that the user can click on and increment that number and have it go up each time the user clicks on the button. So it sounds like a fairly simple project, but in an interview setting, it's difficult to do that sort of on the spot and quickly and efficiently, and they want to see that you can do that effectively from scratch and in this situation. So I thought it would be a good idea tonight to basically give myself that challenge. I've not prepared or practiced for this in any way. I'm just going to start entirely from scratch, from creating and setting up the initial project and trying to get this app up and running on the screen. So we'll see how this goes. There'll probably be some mistakes and little things along the way, but want to try to get this built as quickly as I can. So I'm going to start down here in my terminal. I'm just doing this on the desktop. I'm going to run Vite at latest. I'm using Vite here, so I think that will be a little bit faster than doing something like create React app. It takes a little more time to run. We're doing React, JavaScript, and it looks like that's all set up now. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that folder, which should be right on my desktop. Here's the counter app. We'll get this opened up. Open up my terminal, and with Vite, always want to remember to run install. So I'm going to do that down here and make sure the dependencies get installed into package.json before we open up the app. We'll give that just a minute to finish installing here. Should be pretty quick. All right, good. And then with the Vite project, it's been a little while. I've been doing create React app recently. I think we're npm run dev is what we want. Good. We've got the server running, and we can open this up here in Chrome, and this is just the default template. Now, ironically, Vite actually kind of gives you that counter app built in if we click right here, but we're of course going to be deleting and getting rid of that. So I'm just going to kind of quickly delete the things that I don't need here. We'll go into the source folder. I don't really need this assets folder at all. I don't think we need this index.css at all. Do some styles in the app CSS when we get there. That's all I need to get rid of from the main.jsx. Don't need useState yet. We'll be bringing that in later as I build the app. I'll leave the import statement for the app CSS. We'll get rid of this and basically get rid of everything inside the return statement here. So we'll select all of this and delete, and then we'll be setting up our own. Just make this a container here with a class name of app. Just write test on there to make sure things are working. And I should have, yeah, looks like that I must have some default styling still in here from Vite. Yeah, I'm going to delete all of this and get rid of that, and then once I save, okay, so now we're left with a very blank white looking website here that we can work from. So I'm going to tile this to the right side of the screen and VS Code on the left. Reduce that down just a little bit. And now to just give myself some very basic styling so we don't have such a bright white screen over there. Let's make the body, the background color, we'll make it like just a dark kind of neutral background. Oh, not BBB, I want 222. There we go, like a dark gray. We'll make the text color white smoke. And I'm trying to think what else we're going to need with this. I'll want to put everything roughly in the center. So I'll go display flex, justify content center, move everything to the middle, and put some padding at the top just to move things down. This doesn't need to be perfect, just maybe not that much, maybe 250 pixels. Okay, so that's roughly where we'll be displaying things on the screen. I know I'm going to have an H1 for the text content we'll be displaying. So let's make this just a little bigger. I think default styling for an H1 is usually 2 rems, so maybe we'll make this 3.5 rems. Oops, need to say font size, obviously, for that to work, if I can type correctly. Okay, so H1, and then I know I'm going to have a button too, which we don't have in the JSX yet, but just to make it look a little bit nicer than what the default HTML styling would be, let's make the button, let's say, a width of 150 pixels, a height of 50 pixels, a border radius of 10 pixels. We'll do background color is going to be blue, and maybe not such a bright blue, just a little darker than this. We'll drag that down, and then I'll do the color of the text is going to be white smoke as well, because that most likely won't inherit from the body. All right, so getting into actually building the app now. Okay, so I said we're going to have an H1. This will be where we'll actually put the count. So I'm just going to hard code that as a 0. Obviously, we'll be making that a state variable in just a little bit so we can update that. Then I'll put the button down here. We're going to say, let's see, we'll just say click for now. It doesn't really matter what the button says. And just because that's going to bother me, we'll go back to the app here. And make sure the text align for everything's going to be in the center. There you go. That looks a little bit better. Okay, back to our app JSS. Okay, so instead of having a hard-coded 0 here, what we want to do is now set up our state. So I do need to import this at the top. We'll import useState from React. It's good. And then down here, can call the useState, and I do have a snippet here that I can use, just makes things a little bit easier, and we'll call this the count, and we'll set it equal to 0 as the default whenever the page loads. So down here now we want to make this dynamic, so instead of being a hard-coded 0, we'll set that as the count. Okay, so now what we need is a function. When we click the button on click, is going to increment the count. I'll just make this a function called add1, and I prefer to do this up here. I think even though I could do this inline, it just looks a little bit neater to not put all of that functionality in line. So we want to do const add1, oops, type that correctly, is an arrow function, and now when this is clicked, that's going to call this function, and what we want to do is set count. Now when the new value of state depends on the previous value of state, I believe the best practice is to pass this in to another arrow function and to not just update the previous value of state correctly. So we're going to call this prev count. We're going to pass this into the new arrow function, and we want to return the previous count plus 1. And I think that should work if I'm remembering how to do that correctly. And I think that should be set up. Yep, there we go. So we have the working button clicker, and it looks like that took me less than 10 minutes. So that's a good start. Maybe to just go one layer farther, a good next step to this would be maybe to have 2 buttons, and we're going to change the text of this one. This is going to be add 1, and this one's going to be subtract 1. Then we can have a little bit more functionality to this. And if this were a real app, I'd want to separate those out, not have that look like that, but for now we'll leave that alone. So for the subtract one, we're going to do on click, and we'll set this equal to a function called subtract1, and I'll set that function up here. Make that an arrow function, and pretty similar to our add function, pass in another arrow function here. And what we'll want to do is return the previous count -1, pass in the previous count here. But maybe another variable along the way could be that we never want this to go below 0. So we'll just add a quick check in here. If prev count is equal to 0, then we're just going to return, or I can just say return 0, and then it will set that equal to 0. Else we'll return this down here. So that should be set up now. If I save, let's see if this is working. Looks like the subtractions are working, and notice it'll stop at 0. It won't allow me to go below that into negative numbers. I can add to the count, and I can subtract it here. So there we go. It looks like we have a working application. Took just a little over 10 minutes, not too long, and that's how we would kind of do that interview challenge. If you have any other thoughts on how you might do this, or maybe a better way to set up this functionality, feel free to comment and let me know. And other than that, hope you found this video helpful.